So I believe we can start. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending our panel. So this is quite appreciated, especially we are starting quite early on the last day of the conference. So our panel is entitled Leveraging leveraging the potential of digital technology in medicine from a data protection perspective. My name is Mounaïm El Yacoubi. I'm a professor at Institut Polytechnique de Paris. So I do research and teach in artificial intelligence and data science. And for this panel, we have four wonderful panelists that comes from different areas and expertise. So I will introduce them in the order of their intervention, starting by Holger Fröhlich from Fraunhofer Sky Institute in Germany. And then we have Johan
True. from the University of Luxembourg.
From the University of Luxembourg. And then we have Maika Marin from the Association Parkinson in Madrid in Spain. And Noémie Bontrider, a PhD student at the University of Namur in Belgium. So how we are going to organize our panel today. So first I will let the panelists introduce themselves and what they do and the task they address in general. And then, so we'll have three rounds. This is the first round. And on the second round, I will let them talk about their involvement in the projects and the tasks that they have addressed. And then the last round will be dedicated to the, how they envision the future of the use of digital technology and AI in medicine. So let's start. So I'll let Holger Fröhlich from Sky Institute, Fraunhofer in Germany, to introduce yourself and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mounaïm. So, yeah, my name is Holger Fröhlich. So I'm heading the AI and Data Science group at the Fraunhofer Institute for Algorithms and Scientific Computing in St. Augustin, close to Bonn. And I'm a professor for biomedical data science at the University of Bonn. So my original background is actually in computer science with a focus area in artificial intelligence. So I'm in that field a little bit longer in the meantime. So I studied in the 1990s. So already at that time there was AI, in fact. Yeah? So AI is something that actually dates back to the 1950s. It's not a new thing. Yeah? Yeah, so my interest and what I'm working on with my team is in essence development of mostly machine learning algorithms, so algorithms that learn from data, yeah? For applications in biomedicine. So the idea behind is, of course, so that medicine nowadays is something that's producing more and more data. Yeah? So, but of course, understanding this data is for a human being only possible up to a very limited extent. Yeah? So you can maybe look into one variable, two variables at most, yeah? So and a few data points. And then at some point we are lost. Yeah? So you need machines. And this is actually where machine learning comes into play. Yeah? And of course, machine learning is a subfield of AI, yeah? So also to clarify that. Yeah? And it's actually also a field that's not very recent, but also quite old. Yeah? So also dates back actually to the 1950s in its origin. Yeah? Okay, so and what I'm interested in is basically three larger questions. So how do we in the future maybe find in a more rational manner targets for new therapies? How do we find the right patients to treat? Yeah, so basically which is called nowadays precision medicine. Yeah, so the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. So this is actually a data-driven decision that has to be taken for that. Yeah. And very closely coupled with that is the question, how do we in the future maybe make clinical trials more successful, which are, of course, the prerequisite to bring new therapies on the market. So this is maybe a brief introduction from my side.
Thank you, Holger. So let's turn to Johan Klukman from the University of Luxembourg. So could you please introduce yourself and also tell us about the added value of the use of digital technology in medicine?
Yeah, thank you very much. And also from my side, hi, welcome. I'm very happy to be here. I'm a doctor, medical doctor, clinician by training. And also to mention, we are actually not only panelists, we are a team. We work together on a project. And we brought the different perspective on this data analysis in healthcare project. You will hear a little bit more about the project in a minute, but I'm representing the doctor here. And I'm the chair of digital medicine at the University of Luxembourg. It's a new field in research in academia, digital medicine. And this means that we think about how could health technologies, digital technologies, be introduced into healthcare procedures. So actually what Holger says, he tries to find the better AI for better data. I try to understand how we could use this data for better healthcare. And this is actually also the play within the team here, that we have different perspective. And as I said, I'm looking at it from a clinical point of view. How can we use better data, maybe coming from an AI? But for me, AI in the end is a tool that gives me better data, a better prediction of something, and I call data information. There's a difference between data and information, because information includes data plus the context, so what it actually should be used for. And I'm thinking about how can we use this data in healthcare to make the life of an individual patient better, because when I treat a patient, it's just one patient in front of me, and here the personalization approach from AI is really unbelievable coming up, but also from a societal perspective. So how can we use the same data that we can use for individual care also to better understand the quality of healthcare? And I'm not just talking about research, finding better biomarker, better decisions, but also monitoring the quality of care in a better way. So all these values for the individual patient, maybe even for the healthcare professional team, but also for society, even linked to reimbursement, are basically the focus of my research. How can we solve this? I always say from a medical, socio-economic perspective. And maybe let me add in the end, the economic perspective is currently adding a huge pressure on the development and the adoption of AI in healthcare, because you might heard about the German DIGA. There's a new law in Germany that allows smart devices, actually smart algorithms. You can call them AI, but I wouldn't go so fast. But if data is used by an app to improve the patient's life, it gets reimbursed by the healthcare insurance. So it's an app, an algorithm, software as a medical device that you can prescribe as a doctor. And for the company, it means they make money because the insurance pays for it. And for the patient, it means they get access to this improvement by AI. So there's currently an economic pressure on this development. And since Germany did this, France said, we can do the same. Belgium here actually was the first to do it, but it didn't work well. So now they changed it. So the mHealth pyramid in Belgium is actually a very similar approach. So we have now a reimbursement for adding value AI. So if an AI, if an algorithm adds value to patients, to healthcare, it will get reimbursed. And here I'm actually co-chairing as a rapporteur a task force of the assessors, the HTA bodies in Europe, who are all want to implement this concept. So we see a big economic pressure on the development in AI in healthcare. And of course, this has challenges for the protection, but also, and that's what I bring on the table here, the added value of using better data, better information for better healthcare.
Thank you. So, let's turn to Micah. So could you please present yourself, who you are, what do you do at the association, and how patients actually use digital technology in general?
Thank you, Monim. Good morning, everybody, and welcome here. As Monim said, I'm Maika Marin. I'm coming from Asociación Parkinson Madrid in Spain. I'm a psychologist and social worker, and what we do there in APM, in Parkinson Madrid, is to provide care and services, rehabilitation services to people with Parkinson's disease. We are a team of physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, social workers, psychologists, and our main focus is to look after people, I mean, to try to improve their quality of life, because it's a very complex disease. So apart from that, we do dissemination that is quite important, training for patients in many areas that are important for them. And since 2001, we also collaborate in research. And of course, we collect data for different uses. And in general, okay, there is not just one patient's opinion, but in general, what people tell you is that they are really willing to know what's the result of sharing their data, what are the benefits. But there is a lack also of information regarding this, because there is not a culture of data. So it's not everybody that knows what means to share that data, what are the benefits or the risks. So I think this is a very important aspect that we need to cover in the next future or right now. And because it's true that this is something that it's becoming in our daily lives, is something that is going to be regular, and we need to inform people what are their rights and risks. So probably one of the main reasons because patients are not so much aware of what's going on is because they don't really have an important role in some governmental bodies, even in university, I mean in clinical areas or academic areas. Sometimes we are not involved because at the end we are all patients. And it's very important to take into account people's opinion, because for democratic reasons, but also if we want to transform healthcare system, yeah, we need to take into account all the stakeholders, and the data is coming from people. So yeah, I think that's a very important aspect from patients' perspective.
Okay, thank you, Maika. So let's turn to the legal side. We have Noémie Montry there. So could you, Noémie, could you present yourself? What do you do and your interest in this area?
Thank you, Monim. So yeah, as you said, I have a law background, and I bring this legal perspective to this kind of projects. I work at the Research Center Information Law and Society at University of Namur, and I focus then on the legal implications of AI use, including in the healthcare sector, but not only. But here, definitely, I was involved in this project for using AI for personalized medicine, and there are many implications on the legal side, but also on the ethical side for using such technologies in the sector. And as you know, there are many developments of the legal framework, including with the AI Act that was approved by the Council 2 days ago, and the European Health Data Space that has been approved by the European Parliament last month. I also really find interesting to have a broader perspective regarding the EU approach to regulating AI that may change slightly regarding innovation when we compare to other innovations when we look at AI regulation. But here we will definitely focus on the legal implications of the use of AI in healthcare, and more specifically for personalized medicine.
Okay, thank you, Noémie. Thank you for the general introduction regarding this topic from different sides, from the artificial intelligence, the medicine, patient perspective, and the legal side. So let's move now to discussing more specifically the projects. so which is the leveraging the potential of digital technology in medicine. And Holger, as the coordinator actually of the projects, could you give us an overview about the project and the main results that have been achieved, please?
Yeah, thank you, Munim. So in essence, or maybe to explain here also for the others, so what the four of us and a few also others that are not present today here brought us together at the beginning was really a collaboration. Yeah, a collaboration within a European project called DIGIPD. And the idea behind this project was indeed to better understand the potential value, but also impact of digital medical device solutions. Yeah? So as we all know, right, so nowadays there are lots of promises about, for example, smartwatches and gait sensors and certain apps and so on that are more or less flooding the market. Yeah? Of course, these vendors promise you everything, that's clear. Yeah? So, but I think what we have to critically ask ourselves, of course, always is, how precise and accurate is that what these technologies really can measure? So is there actually some sort of potential benefit compared to what a doctor can do nowadays? Yeah? So which is usually, this project was focusing on the application of Parkinson's disease, mainly just let's say relatively subjective rating of certain symptoms that the doctor sees. Yeah? So indeed, even in clinical studies, yeah, so there are certain rating scales, yeah, so which go from, I mean, Jochen knows this better, let's say 0 to 5 or so. I'm just saying something, and then the doctor would actually more or less look at the patient and say, okay, that's a 3, that's a 4, or something like that. Yeah? So this is, of course, relatively subjective, and it can vary over time. Of course, if I see a patient in the morning, maybe this presents differently than if I see a patient in the evening or so. Yeah? And if the patient comes next day, yeah, or would come back the next day, then even something else might come up. Yeah? So this is the situation that we have at the moment. Yeah? So this is gold standard. Yeah? So, and of course now we have to contrast this to these big promises, yeah? So of such technologies, but at the same time, as I said, so we have to critically ask ourselves, so how valid are those promises? Yeah? So can we really accurately and precise measure something with these approaches? Yeah? In our project, actually, we focused on 3 different technologies. Yeah? So we cannot, of course, assess everything. Yeah? So we looked into a digital gait sensor. Yeah? So we looked into digital voice recordings. Yeah? So that's actually Munim's expertise here, and also face video recordings. Yeah? So because we know that people with Parkinson's have something that's called hypomimia, so they have a reduced movement of their face muscles. So again, that's something that Munim is an expert on, yeah? So how to analyze such data. Yeah? And in essence, what we then ask ourselves, as I said, so by collecting and looking into a large number of patient-related data, so we looked into over 1,000 patients actually in this project. Yeah? So was indeed, how can we, let's say, correlate what these devices measure with established clinical assessments? Yeah? So can we also follow the progression as currently noted by a doctor with such approaches? Yeah? So not only distinguish, let's say, a healthy from a diseased patient, yeah? So, but really follow the slope. Yeah? Can we maybe even identify certain or characterize with such approaches different subgroups of patient trajectories? So these were the type of questions that we asked ourselves. Yeah? And then, of course, and that's why Maika and Noemi here are sitting also with us. Yeah? So this is a highly interdisciplinary question. Yeah? So because it's not only a data science question, but it has, of course, also naturally impact on, of course, medicine. Yeah? So, but of course, also everything that we do, and this is at the end of the day, it's data processing. It's heavy data processing. Yeah? So has to follow a legal framework. Yeah? So it has to follow the rules that we have in the European Union, and that's where Noemi was coming into play. Yeah? And of course, we can only measure and bring something prospectively to the market if it's accepted by patients. Yeah? So if patients do not like these type of approaches, collecting a lot of data from them, for example, via a gait sensor, yeah? and then running machine learning algorithms on them and so on. So if patients would say, I don't like this, so then we shouldn't probably do it. Yeah? And in order to understand this perspective, we had, in fact, Maika here on the project, who ran a big survey, in fact, yeah, simply of patients. Yeah? So with more than 300 patients, which we simply asked a lot of questions about this. Yes? Well, how do you feel about actually using such devices? Yeah? So how do you feel about sharing your data for these purposes? How do you feel about that your data is at the end of the day processed with the help of AI? Yeah? So this is of course what we wanted to find out. I can maybe, and then I suggest that maybe Noemi and Maika themselves say a few more words about their own results in this project, but let me just very briefly summarize some of the main findings that we had from a data science perspective. Yeah? So as I said, so this was in this team here, specifically Munim and my own team, and then also another team from Luxembourg that were doing the actual data analysis. So what we found in essence, while indeed processing these data a lot with quite advanced, in fact, also AI approaches. Yeah? So there's different things. So on one hand, indeed, we found that there's a quite good agreement of what each of these different devices measured with the current rating scales, clinical rating scales of doctors. Yeah? There was also clearly shown so that this was true if you follow a patient over time, so meaning in essence the progression as currently assessed by a doctor could be mimicked by what these devices measured. Yeah? We could also demonstrate that different patient subgroups, trajectories of patients exist over time, and that they can be characterized also by indeed these digital device technologies, in this case more specifically also a gait sensor. And yeah, so last but not least, we could even find that there is a certain association also of what these devices measure, so in this case a gait sensor, even with certain alterations in the blood, so blood-based biomarkers, in fact. Yeah? So there seems to be quite some interesting relationships here. Yeah? So in that sense, I would say so that from a data science perspective, yeah, so the project clearly demonstrated, yeah, so that there is quite some potential in this data that these devices measure. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you, Holger, for this nice overview regarding the project and also the main finding from data science and artificial intelligence side. So Johan, so as a doctor, could you tell us about the benefit and the added value of this project and this use digital technology in medicine?
Yeah, so as a classical doctor, I don't care about data protection, right? I just want to use it to generate something better, to get better information, to support my clinical decision, you know, that I can make a diagnosis better, that I can select the treatment better, that if I have chosen a treatment, that I know, oh, this treatment is actually working for this particular patient or not. So I, as a doctor, have questions to the data, and the data should give me the answer. And these questions, you can call them value in healthcare, and maybe you have heard the term value-based healthcare, and this is typically thought as a money-based healthcare. But I think when we see this type of data, we have a new definition of value-based healthcare, which means we have to look at the data sources and the context of the data, as I said, on the information. And in this project, we had different sources of data. So we had these wearable sensors, gait, speech, movement of the face. which are all relevant information in Parkinson, because patients have a problem in walking, have a problem in speaking, and have a problem with the mimics, which are also affecting the communication. You know, if you don't use your face muscle, you have the feeling you're depressed, but you're not depressed, you're just unable to move your face muscle. So for social interaction, that's a quite important symptom. So all these symptoms that we can measure with these, let's say, wearable or technology are relevant information for me as a doctor. And of course, when we use these devices, these wearables, we hope that, oh, I don't even have to see the patient. I know what the patient has because he's using it at home. So home monitoring is quite important with these devices. And last but not least, these devices give us objective data. So it's quantifiable and it really measures something. Whereas me as a doctor, I'm doing my classical examination. And that is subjective. It's based on my personal training, how well am I trained, and of course the condition of the patient. He's right sitting in front of me, I'm doing an examination. So this data is rather subjective. And if I tell my other doctor, oh, I have seen the patient and he had a score of something based on my examination, the other doctor might interpret this score differently. So we have subjective data from the doctor, we have objective data from devices, and then we ask patients, what do you think? What's your impression or your perspective? And there's this term PROM, patient-reported outcome, or PREM, patient-reported experience measure, which actually gives the patient a voice, and we will hear in a minute more about that. But that's also subjective, you know. I mean, everybody of us was a patient or is a patient, and we know we interpret our findings differently. So why am I saying that? Because I think it's important that we not only talk about data protection, we have to look deeper. We have to understand what type of data are we talking about, and how is it relevant for the doctor. So, and this has to be taken into account when we talk about protection, because the added value of the data is important. And this is basically what we entered from the clinical perspective also into the project, because we collected all kinds of data, this objective data from devices, clinical examination, patient data, even lab tests, which are also objective data. And we gave them to Holger and others in the team, and they made their magic using AI, and they couldn't predict everything. And I think a very important finding was that we could identify rapid and slow progressor. So if you can imagine, if you have a chronic disease, the first question is, how bad is it, and will I die in 3 years? Or will I have another 20 years? And usually this is very hard for a clinician to identify when you see a patient the first time, but data-driven, we could predict this. And this is an important characteristic of the disease. Some patients have a rapid progression, some patients have a slow progression. But the value of this information is, for me, the interpretation, what do I do with it? I know, because I have to do my clinical decision based on this, rapid or slow progressor. The patient knows, they can adjust. Okay, I'm 50, I will die in 5 years, so I need to arrange my things. Or I'm 70 and I have another 20 years with the disease, so I have to react differently. I mean, there's, of course, a depressing system reaction to this, but there's also some kind of positive act to this. So the value of this information is basically the clinical decision for the doctor, but also the important for the patient. And this is what we brought on the table, and we tried to tell Holger, you know, this is a whole data set, but please predict the patient perspective, or please predict the doctor's decision, or please predict something else. So we as a doctor gave the annotation for the AI to be trained of the value. Is this a value for the doctor? Is this a value for the patient? Is this a value for society? I told you economics are also a value. And basically this needs to work together. Otherwise AI can predict everything and we don't know what to do with it. And of course there was basically Noemi coming in. We have to do it also in a framework that it's ethically and legally sound, because the patient wants to trust in us. And not just me, the doctor, saying, I don't care about protection. The patient cares about protection, so I'm part of that system. But I want to bring this added value discussion to the discussion of protection, because for me, there has to be an equilibrium because I see the potential and the power of these new technologies to make healthcare better, and we should not really lose this power by just protecting the abilities. And this is a little bit my perspective also on the project, and I really like to work with all of you in the project and explain the different perspective to you here.
Thank you, Johan. So I think a word that came back and forth from both of you was data, right? So each time we talk about AI, we talk about data, and behind data there are people, patients, and this is where your association, MICA, comes into play. So could you tell us a little bit about what you have done in the project? What were the perception of by the patient of the use of these technologies, and questions if they have?
Yes.
If they had some questions.
I was listening to you, and it's true. We all know the benefits that all the analysis of data, massive amounts of data, can bring to predict things, to improve treatments, diagnosis, and so on. And that's really amazing, and it can bring, and we hope it will bring plenty of good news to patients and to healthcarers and families to improve the quality of life of people. But of course, taking into account data protection, yeah, that's really important. We cannot do it in an unsafe way, and Noemi will be talking about that later on. And also the subjective part of the patient, it's very important. Because now with data, we are very focused on the objective aspects, because it's great that now you can rely on something to really see that the reasons that are behind. Because when you ask someone, why do you have a headache? The person really doesn't know. So they can tell you whatever, that they think the reason that is for their headache. And to have objective data, it's wow, it's amazing. But it's also important the other part of the person, the subjective part, because sometimes we are dealing with patients, and as professionals, when they came into us, and I asked them about their symptomatology, and I'm talking about myself also, I'm just having a picture of what type of daily activities may be more affected, and later on, if I ask the person, what's the worst thing for you in your daily life, the answer can be very different. Maybe it's not bradykinesia, maybe it's constipation. So, and we are very focused so we need to use the best part of everything, the best part of data, analyze for objective information, but not forgetting the other part of the person. Otherwise, we don't gather the holistic version of the patient, and we cannot provide the best service. Apart from this, that we all agree on this. In the project, as Holger said, we conducted an online survey and interviews, face-to-face and online interviews also, in order to gather the opinion of people about their willingness to use digital medical devices and also to share data for healthcare purposes. And with PD cohorts in France, in Germany, and in Spain. We gathered answers from 333 people. And it was when we analyzed the socio-demographic aspects of the cohort that we took into account. It's true that most of them were under 65 years old. They have a high educational level, and half of them have already used some type of apps or digital technology in order to measure steps or the quality of sleep, even software for voice recognition. So, because it's true that we are all using technology already, even elderly people are using it. So, the results were really, really amazing. In both cases, 90% of the people were willing to use digital medical devices that had good consequences. I mean, in order to be better treated, or if that data could help to others in their same situation, or for future research and improvement of treatments and things like that. Of course, there were some concerns related with the data privacy, but still not too many. I mean, half of the people interviewed and were saying that they were okay and that they consider there could be some risk, but the benefits are more than the risk. In any case, they were worried about maybe the lack of responsibility to attribute errors in using data, also concerns about individual privacy, and also they were unsure if in artificial intelligence will be able to detect unique characteristics and symptomatology of people. So yeah, of course, they didn't want to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing. That later on, Noemi will be talking about this. And yeah, apart from this, depending on the age groups, for instance, yeah, people above 65 and much more if they are over 85. I mean, they were concerns about their abilities to manage digital medical devices, and because even in research, sometimes we use very complex devices and uncomfortable and things like that. So we really need to be very careful because we are dealing with people, and sometimes you know that you are gathering good data, but in the real market and in the real daily life, they won't be wearing it. I mean, that device. So as Holger said before, that's a very important aspect. When we were asking about the devices, smartphones, for instance, is something that everybody has one in their pocket. So they were willing to use the smartphone for whatever reasons to gather good data. And yeah, of course, if it's gathering data for patients' purposes is much better than for marketing purposes or any other kind of purposes. And in general, yeah, it's people accepts the use of their data with common sense. I mean, it's just if it helps to track functionalities, symptoms, if it improves interactions with health and care professionals, to provide knowledge, social support, and instructions. We were gathering feedback that instructions help them a lot. Recording of real video, I mean real people's videos explaining how to use things, to have a feedback also. When we gather data, that in research is very complex to provide the person with a feedback because sometimes it's raw data and it's something quite complex to say anything without a clinical opinion analysis behind. But yeah, if you explain things, but you need to inform about all the data sharing aspects, rights, risk, and in most of the cases it's common sense that people will use the devices if there are good reasons behind. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Maika. So it's quite interesting findings. So basically people have a positive attitude. They want to use digital technology, but they do have some concerns regarding data protection and protecting their privacy. So this is where why your role is this important, Noemi. So could you tell us about the legal aspects in the project, please?
Thank you. And yes, definitely, even when you talk with people, everyone is always afraid of for their privacy when we talk about sharing health data. And in the project, more specifically, I focused on data protection aspects, as it was said, and so on the conformity of the project with the general data protection regulation. So how can we use AI in medical research and practice in conformity with the GDPR? So as you know, personal data are any information relating to an identified or unidentifiable natural person. named the data subject. So any form of information is covered. For example, voice recordings, video recordings of face movements and gait signals are data relating to an identified or identifiable person. So they are personal data as long as the person concerned is alive. And as outlined by Bart van der Sloot on Wednesday, the fact that personal data concerning deceased persons are not covered may be reconsidered. I will not extend on this because he talked about this on Wednesday. What's interesting here is that digital biomarkers are abstract features from this personal data, and they are also personal data even if the human cannot understand the very abstract features, because these data relate to the person concerned likewise. Besides, all mentioned data are data concerning health, either because they become health data due to the context and purposes of their processing, so namely for data that is processed to extract the digital biomarkers, so gait signals in this context are data concerning health. It was specified by the EDPB in a document relating to the COVID when we were using broad data, personal data that were then considered as health data as well. Because they are health data, they are conferred greater protection, as you know. So there is a set of requirements stemming from the GDPR. I will not explain all of them in this conference, but focus on those that may challenge the processing operations at stake. And typically, in such projects, a joint controller agreement or data processing agreement must be put in place between collaborating organizations, especially because sharing historical patient-level data is required to develop AI models. And the finalization of such contracts can take up to 2 years before any data-driven research and development can start, depending on the number of parties and partners. But in the project, we noticed that it took around 1.5 years to do these agreements. So considering how challenging this may be in practice, the European health data space is meant to facilitate health data sharing for research. Then it's the so-called secondary use of data, but also for medical practice, the so-called primary use of data, as you know, and it was told more extensively in this conference in other panels. Among the requirements, the ones that can be regarded as necessitating human involvement may particularly challenge the processing operations at stake. First, while features describing the patient's characteristics are not necessarily human understandable, accuracy of personal data must be maintained. And this obligation of means will be assessed more or less severely depending on the context of the processing. And in the medical field, whether for research or medical practice, it is particularly important that data is accurate because its processing has consequences for patients' health. This task of maintaining accuracy of personal data can be challenging when data is not human understandable, as I said, and it can be the case when the features describing the characteristics of the individual patient are extracted using deep learning methods. It would be even more difficult to explain digital biomarkers in a transparent, intelligible, and easily accessible form using clear and plain language. And this may be required to provide a copy of personal data when the data subject exercises his or her right of access. And here we could argue that the personal data itself does not need to be explained, but only its processing or the decision in accordance with transparency requirements. So this depends on the interpretation that we have of this right of access. Understanding the outcomes of the processing operations is crucial, as you know, because digital biomarkers and advanced analytical methods will not be usable in medical practice if a human cannot take decisions based on the outcomes. And this human involvement in the diagnostic and treatment decisions is required because solely automated individual decision-making is prohibited, where decisions significantly affect the data subject, and definitely diagnostic and treatment decisions have sufficiently significant effects on the person concerned to reach this threshold. Because they are likely to have a prolonged or a permanent impact on the person concerned. Since the prohibition refers to solely based automated processing, this means that there is no human involvement in the decision, and it has been specified by the DIGIPD that to qualify as human involvement, the controller must ensure that any oversight of the decision is meaningful, rather than just a token gesture. It should be carried out by someone who has the authority and competence to change the decision, and they should consider as part of the analysis all the relevant data. The fact that decisions of physicians cannot be based on solely automated processing of personal data does not only stem from the GDPR, but also from the fact that only qualified persons are allowed to provide healthcare. This human involvement jives with the necessity that the controller remains able to provide meaningful information about the logic involved in the processing operation leading to a decision, to comply with the transparency principle, and more specifically with the obligation to provide a set of information to the data subject in a concise, transparent manner. If the controller is making an automated decision, it must tell the data subject that they are engaging in this type of activity, provide meaningful information about the logic involved, and explain the significance and envisaged consequences of the processing. Healthcare rules also foresee this right, the right of the patient to receive information about their healthcare condition and to give informed consent. The required provision of information is often understood as intended to enable the data subject to understand the logic involved in the processing itself, which is actually impossible. And here it would be more interesting to interpret this obligation as one that obliges to explain the decision itself. And for that, the person needs to understand the outcome from the processing. But because of time limits.
Yeah, thank you, Noemi. So I think we are quite on time before giving room to questions from the audience. So let's talk briefly about the future, how each of you see the future of the use of digital technology and AI in medicine. So Holger, just I will ask you each just 2 minutes, please. How do you see the future of using of this kind of technology, especially with the advance also with the maybe large language models and foundation models, right?
Yeah, thank you, Munim. Yeah, so I think what this project first of all demonstrated, right, so is the potential, right, so that we now have, right, so while using AI and machine learning and applying this to health-related data, right, so and of course this is a big movement now, yeah, so which you can actually see globally, yeah, so as I said from the beginning, yeah, so medicine is some discipline that's becoming more and more data-driven, and where indeed the intent is also to base decisions in all types of the stages from the basic research up to really the point that a patient sees a doctor, more on data, and thus to make this a bit more, let's say, evidence-based in some sense, yeah? So, or based on objectively measured things, yeah? So now, of course, when you think this down the road, right, so there's not only the one type of medical data, right? So data in medicine is increasingly spanning a very large spectrum, right? So, and data that we looked into here primarily, so basically data coming from certain device technologies is only one aspect, right? So, but there's, of course, also genomic data, there's data collected throughout, of course, the real-world data space, so basically so-called real-world data, so comprising, for example, EHRs. Yeah? There's imaging data, of course, right? So there is, of course, even data that's coming from social media, yeah? So which can be seen as health-related. At the end of the day, I think where we are heading is a way how to connect each of these data. Yeah? So there's this vision now of this European health data space, yeah? So connecting health-related data across a whole spectrum. However, and this is the challenge, yeah? So this is very difficult at the moment to achieve in a regulatory compliant manner, yeah? So given the complexity that was just outlined. And this is in essence where we have, from my point of view, really to be careful also here in Europe, right? So that we keep the right balance, let's say, between the complexity of regulation and realizing the potential for innovation and increased value in healthcare. Yeah?
Thank you. Johan?
I try to make it quick.
Yeah.
I think there's no doubt that increasing data availability and AI or other smart algorithms will generate value. They're not there yet. In a way, yes, it works, but it's not adapted in healthcare. There's no patient treated with an AI yet. But in a few years, there will be patients that are substantially supported and treated by AI, and they will realize the benefit of it. And this generates a pressure on our society to interact with this. And this is relevant for the protection, I think. Just one quick example out of this questionnaire which we did. So finding is simple. The patient gives the data if they receive benefit from it. This was a very simple answer. So if we generate benefits, the patient will give data. And that is a societal reaction, and we need to protect it. One little thing was important. We know education level improves healthcare. We don't know why, we can discuss. So if a patient is better educated, they will benefit from healthcare better. What we saw is that the higher educated patients were very much willing to use technology, but they were not willing to use AI. Which means there's some reason why that is. So why are high educated people not willing to use AI even though they want to use technology? And this is a societal perception of this change, which of course is fostered by this discussion about safety, privacy, and people are scared, and we have to deal with this. We all here, that we make it the benefits available versus the risks.
Thank you. So, Maika, so in 1 minute or two, please, how do you see the engagement and needs and concerns of the patients in the near future?
Yeah, as the other panelists were saying, we also, I mean, from the patient's point of view, we also see the benefits of this data use. Of course, protecting, of course, informing people of how things are going to be done, not to create frustration and not to create like different levels of knowledge, and be able to provide feedback or to refuse to share data for other purposes that maybe they don't want to. I don't know how this could be done. We will see it in the future if this could be done. But it's really important to communicate what's going on. Regulatory things are going very fast, and it's not an easy topic for patients. It's quite tough, and sometimes it's boring to talk about the data with patients. So we need to communicate between us in order to translate them the information in a simple way, but so that they can take informed decisions also. Yeah, and protect rights. Yeah.
Thank you, Micah. So let's finish with Noemi. So how do you see the near future, Noemi, especially with the advent of different regulation like AI Act and so on?
So yeah, as I said, it's important that the physician keeps understanding the output, and actually the AI Act is requiring this as well in the design of the AI system. The AI Act actually will not apply to AI systems specifically developed and used for the sole purpose of scientific research, which can be a pity, but actually they need to take the measures into account, also the outputs, the human oversight measures, because otherwise what is researched cannot be used. And actually this regulation adds a set of further requirements for the placing on the market, making available on the market, or putting into service of high-risk AI-based medical devices in the European Union, of course. These include actually AI systems intended to allow direct diagnosis or monitoring of vital physiological processes, and AI systems intended to provide information which is used to take decisions with diagnosis or therapeutic purposes. These systems are high-risk AI systems according to the AI Act when you dig into both regulations. For these high-risk AI systems, a set of requirements are added to the already applicable requirements stemming from the medical devices framework. And here, very fast, interestingly, the AI Act explicitly requires that the system at stake are designed and developed in such a way, including with appropriate human-machine interface tools, that they can be effectively overseen by natural persons during the period in which the AI system is in use. And these oversight measures must enable natural persons to whom human oversight is assigned to correctly interpret the system's outputs. So the healthcare professionals must be able to correctly interpret the output for informed decision-making in accordance with the data protection and healthcare rules that we already mentioned.
Thank you, Noemi. So let's, I think we have enough time for questions. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Roland Pochet. I am just at the creation of a new society for which I would like to cooperate with you. And it is called, it is a AISBL in French, Association Internationale, which is specific to Belgium in Europe, unique in Europe. We gather different France, Belgium, Germany, 5 member states, and this apply a rule from the Data Governance Act. The Data Governance Act is a law regulation made by EU, which is applied, and as it is approved by the European Parliament, it has to be applied in every member state. And so it was just voted by the Belgian Parliament, and it's about the fact that the patient can send his data. He has to give consent and trust and a mandate to collect the data, because a patient has no data. He believes he has data, he has no data. The data are somewhere else. They are in the MDs, in the pharmacists, in the mutuelle, in the hospital, but not in his hand. And by the way, data, there is no property for data. Data has no property. Anyway, so I would like, and I thank you for this proposal because it's very, very important, and we should support it, and we definitely support it. But when we talk about AI, we need data. We need big data. And when I read a survey with 300 people, that's peanuts, excuse me. You need 500,000 or 1 million data to do correct AI. Thank you.
Can I just briefly comment on that? Thanks for this important aspect. What I see in the future, that every patient will have an app, maybe more than one, for his or her disease. And that app is basically with the patient all the time. It collects data all the time. The best structured and content-wise data we have. The existing data is nothing against this new data that comes from the app. And the app allows us to get dynamic consent every day. So I think the availability and the consent, which is sorted by the Data Governance Act as well, will be available simply because a patient can give his consent and or his best structured data every day. So I think we have to face this situation in the future. It is not there yet, but it will come. And this affects a lot on how we handle this data, because I agree the data is not in the hand of the patient, but the app will be in the hand of the patient, and that changes a lot in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you. Christian Ramsbach from the OECD. I wanted to build on what Jochen, you said about there is an increasing pressure on actors. And Noemi, you also reminded us that human decision makers have to be kept in the loop, in particular when it comes to health data. But the problem that I see in the field is that probably there will be a kind of a pressure indeed for healthcare professionals to follow the advice of the AI system. And there will be a tendency to not necessarily want to override the decision, because it's easier to justify that I followed the recommendation and thus I don't have to give any justification. But if something bad happened, if I override the decision, I will have much more, let's say, to argue why and to explain why I did so. So do you see any kind of, let's call it, chilling effects that would essentially lead machines to be the dominant decision maker at the end, even though the law requires humans to make decisions?
Yes, I think here we had a very interesting discussion with Munim as a data scientist yesterday. And definitely it's possibly, and there is research that is undergone to make the output of the system explainable with an algorithm that you put there for that, an explainability algorithm. So yeah, Munim, maybe you can explain, like, for example, with the characteristics of the voice, when, for example, when we have a system saying that this person may have Parkinson, for example, we can see why with the explainable algorithm, because they will say, okay, this is because the frequency of the voice is different statistically from the usual one. And this, then the physician can use the AI system, and that's required by the law. So it depends on in which society we want to live, definitely. But for the moment, it seems like society doesn't want the system to just give the diagnosis by itself. We definitely need the physician for many legal requirements, to comply with many legal requirements as well. But also, when you dig into the research from Holger as well and so on, in research it's also, I think, very interesting, these tools to understand characteristics of the subgroups of patients here, and there is no decision specifically for treatment or diagnosis of these persons. It's definitely used to better understand why the person has its disease evolving this way and not the other way. So that's my perspective on this.
Good morning. Ciprian Cornei is my name. I work for Philips Research. I like very much your approach, the past and the future. So I have two questions about the past and about the future. About the past, thank you for giving us an idea of how much it took to agree on DPAs among the members. But I'm curious, if you are to compare the ethical board reviews and approvals versus the agreeing on contracts qua period, that's about the past. And about the future, how do you see the reuse of data for other medical fields? Thank you.
Holger?
Yeah, so maybe I can try to make a start. Yeah, so I mean, as Noemi pointed out, right? So currently the situation is so that there's a relatively complex legislation. Yeah, so it's also relatively quickly evolving. Yeah. So, and in essence, the situation is that then the different stakeholders, the different involved organizations are, of course, let's say, always a bit, let's say, nervous that they do something wrong. Yeah? So that, of course, none of the organizations, and you can imagine that this specifically applies also to organizations like ours. Fraunhofer is a publicly funded research organization. Yeah? So we always want to be on the safe side. Yeah? So therefore, our lawyers typically act very conservative. Yeah? So when it comes down to data protection, yeah? And doubt, lawyers would always say we don't do it. Yeah? So just because they fear so that something is violating the law. Yeah? So, and this is just the reality why these negotiations take so long. Yeah? So this is just to explain this. Yeah? So now, of course, the situation looking forward, right, so is that I think there's at the moment a tendency in the European Union to even put more regulations in place. Yeah? So we have now, for example, the AI Act was mentioned, right? So, and other things, yeah, so which we don't know will come in the future. And I think, yeah, so we are, as I also said, yeah, so we have to be careful here, right? So that this increasing complexity does not counteract our own intuitions. Yeah? So of course, there is the best intuition behind all of these regulations. Yeah? So the intuition is, of course, to protect our values, yeah? So as a society, and of course also to, in that regard, protect the privacy of the data of individuals. This is very important, of course. Yeah? So, but I think we have to see that this is always, you know, a fine balance, right? So between two different goals, right? So on one hand, this protection, yeah, so which is correct, yeah? And on the other hand, of course, also the chances that these data have, and they're enormous. I mean, indeed, this field of AI in healthcare is one of the strongest growing areas overall in the world. So it's an exponentially growing market worldwide. Yeah? So we have to see that. Yeah? So, and at the end of the day, so we have to also then ask ourselves, do we want to be part of that or not? Yeah?
Can I just, for the reuse, quickly, the reuse in what I said before, or secondary use, is absolutely needed for research and might be also needed for the individual care of the patient in terms of prevention, prediction, other diseases. But my question is always, why don't we ask the patient, can we use the data for something else? We are having this discussion of secondary use and reuse with the understanding the data is here and the patient is gone. So we cannot ask the patient, but in healthcare, the patient is in front of my door. He's waiting for my next appointment. So if I want to reuse his data, I ask him. And then I get consent for it, and then it's primary use, and it's not really a reuse. And as we heard, data is not governed by somebody. It's actually mandated or consented to use it for something by not asking the patient. So this whole discussion about secondary use, reuse, for me, from a healthcare perspective, in the future is over.
Let's have another question, please.
We will be here, so if you have certain questions, you anyhow can come.
Thanks very much. I'm from the conference called RAID, which stands for the Regulation of AI, Internet and Data, which takes place in Brussels in September. There will be a focus on healthcare there, and thanks for the panel. So my question is about consent. I was going to ask about data reuse, but this is about the pressure to consent for people with terminal diseases, for example. How do you mitigate against, in serious healthcare situations, people are much more likely to consent to say, okay, I'll give it a go because what have I got to lose? I'm dying. That's not a question that's not specific to AI, I don't suppose, but this is there are new possibilities emerging that might be able to help people. So do regulations mitigate for that?
Quick answer.
Yeah, very fast, but then I can. For consent under the GDPR, for these reasons, we will mostly rely on legitimate interest, like research and medical practice, legal basis for processing the data, but definitely consent is required for in healthcare, and here I can let Jochen speak about this.
Yep. I mean, very simple answer. It's the right of the patient to say, use my data in this emergency situation. And the pressure is higher to give consent, but why not? Why shouldn't this be a justifiable decision of a person? So I don't really see this question. In terms of using this for other things, that is definitely a challenge, but for using it for this emergency situation, why shouldn't be there any doubt in the consent? I mean, we have to respect the decision of the individuum, and if the decision is made under pressure, that's human. I mean, we have certain reasons why we make a decision. If we don't respect these reasons, then why should we consent for these reasons? I mean, I see your point, which is relevant for secondary use of this data, but for this immediately primary use,
Okay,
sorry.
thanks. Let's take another question from behind this time.
Hi, I'm a clinical psychologist working in AI. So I really would like, I've been observed that a lot of companies uses large models like Amazon or OpenAI for the sake of research. So I would like to know, from the clinical perspective, how are we going to ensure accuracy and safe space for the patient? And for the legal perspective, what happens when there is a conflict between the research and academia and the market?
So the clinical side, yeah?
So, I mean, we have to regulate this software. If we use it in healthcare, it's software as a medical device, and that basically defines the accuracy and precision. But my point, to answer you from the clinical perspective, we have to continuously monitor not only accuracy and precision, but side effects. So nobody's talking about side effects here. We talk about the prediction algorithm is not correct or the data is being abused or something, but when we use it based on the purpose of this software as a medical device, it will generate side effects. You know, we see you're a clinical neuropsychologist, so we have a lot of DGAs in Germany that actually treat patients with depression, anxiety, etc. They are based on cognitive behavioral interventions, so there's an algorithm that treats patients, and they will have side effects. So we know antidepressant, we don't know how an antidepressant actually works on a biological level, but we treat it, okay? And the doctor can explain it, because the doctor explains the effect, it will improve your depression, and the side effects. You can die because you will increase activity and all of a sudden your mood is not good, but you commit suicide, right? So this is a danger. We don't know about these side effects yet, and we are discussing about precision and accuracy. We should discuss about side effects of using data within its purpose and not abusing or misusing it. That's my answer to this question.
Maybe a last very quick question.
Thank you. Rose Bull from CPDP Europe. I just had a quick question on whether you see a difference in perception by patients between heavy medical treatment using AI or digital technologies and more regular, like day-to-day, lighter treatments. How they perceive the use of digital in both categories.
It's going to depend on the person, really.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there is people more prompt to include like new tools in their treatment, and other people that are more skeptic and so on. So it's just a matter of training the person about the benefits and risk of every approach that we use with them. I think it's more simple than what we think. When you have the person in front of you, you just need to ask them. And if you explain, I mean, you need to explain things properly so that they can make the decision that they want to make, and not a quick one. So, but it's going to depend on the person.
And also on the user. So if the doctor uses AI, for example, to detect from an image a tumor, the patient doesn't care, because in the end, the consequence for the patient means you have a tumor. If the AI is actually interacting with the patient directly, so treating the patient in a personalized approach, then it's a completely different story, because then there's an app helping me directly, so an identity helping me, and this is perceived completely different than if you just rely, oh, the doctor might know which AI he used to making a diagnosis or selecting a treatment.
So I think thank you. We have to close the panel. Thank you for all your takes and insights into these topics and for all the questions. Thank you again.